Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Um, Good afternoon, students. At this meeting, we are going to start our 10th session of language assessment. And this meeting is supposed to be conducted on Ramadan, but because we have already entered
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
the
wabarakatuh.
holiday.
Good afternoon.
Sorry, it's rendering. Because it's already a holiday for Eid, and we have like a Eid Mubarak break for about 2 weeks. And yeah, I think it's a good idea for us to revive again what we have already learned before the holiday. And in this session, we are going to discuss about assessment across curriculum, and designing language assessment framework for curriculum 2013 English lesson planning. Why I think this is necessary to bring the theory and the practice together so that you can connect the dots between the theory of assessment for learning, and assessment as learning, as it is implemented across curriculum framework from some countries, and as it is implemented in our own curriculum to 2013 in Indonesia. Why it is 2013? Actually, now we have already gradually towards curriculum Merdeka, but I think it's a good idea to discuss it started from 2013 curriculum, because some schools are still shifting from the framework of 2013 to curriculum Merdeka. And in my humble understanding, as long as you have the basic knowledge on how it is implemented across curriculum, then it doesn't matter whatever curriculum it will be delivered in Indonesia. Okay, in Indonesia. So yeah, let's just start the discussion, starting from the theory or the concept of assessment for learning, assessment of learning, then assessment as learning. And our learning objectives are first demonstrate an understanding. Again, we revive the knowledge that we have already learned during Ramadan, and now getting near to mid-semester. And I think it's a good idea for us to let's just talk it a bit about demonstrating an understanding of the basic concept of assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning across curriculum. And then we are going to talk about the best practice stories, and it's going to be shared by two nearly alumni, because they have already completed their thesis defense. They are going to share their experience in implementing the assessment framework during their pre-service English teacher internship in Yogyakarta. One in senior high school and the other in junior high school. And after you listen to their stories on how they implement the concept of assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning, you are going to design it with your group, your own group. And mainly for this mid-semester, you are going to be focused on assessment of learning while we are progressing to complete the whole assessment framework until the final semester. So as you see in the learning objective, this one is the points that you're going to gather. And yeah, you're going to work in groups, but for assessment for learning and assessment as learning, you are going to work you a little bit individually, so that you have the sense of part of group works and part of individual work, and also for the part of reflection. Of course, this is also your individual work. So let's just start it from the basic foundation of knowledge of assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning as it is described across the curriculum framework. We have already discussed this much more theoretical before this month, before April. Now let's just see how curriculum framework cross country translated in their curriculum. For assessment of learning or summative assessment, for example, this is Manitoba Education, Citizenship and Youth 2006 in Canada. In their document of Rethinking Classroom Assessment with Purpose in Mind, point out that assessment of learning refers to strategies designed to confirm what students know, demonstrate whether or not they have met curriculum outcomes, or the goals of individualized program. So it's actually should measure individual student. Or certify proficiency and make decision about student future programs or placement. It is designed to provide evidence of achievement to parents, educators, students themselves, and sometimes to outside group. What we point out here is that to make decisions, so it's going to involve scoring and grading. When we see the way Manitoba Education, Citizenship, Youth describe about assessment of learning or summative assessment, we can see they are pointing out on intended curriculum outcome, sufficient information, and they also mention some forms of assessment of learning, such as portfolio, exhibition, performance presentation, simulation, multimedia project, and variety of other written, oral, visual methods, as long as it involves scoring and grading and the goals for decision-making of the students' performance. University of Huddersfield, for example, for British Council, we say that the example of assessment of learning can be national or state tests or end of chapter tests. And if we see on the description of New South Wales, Australia, on their educational standard, they also mention that assessment of learning or summative assessment related to certain outcomes and standards involving ranking or grading student at the end of unit, term, or semester. They further describe that it involves evidence, process, and also feedback. And the point is to give score and grade for the students. And as you plan the assessment, you need to see the reason why. This is from Manitoba Education, Citizenship and Youth. And then you also need to identify what you are assessing. Later on, we can see from the best practice in Indonesia, secondary schools, how they define knowledge and skill. For example, in curriculum 2013, that's going to be the reference on the way you assess and create the assessment of learning for your student. And also, you need to understand that what matters to be measured in the curriculum: knowledge, skills, attitude. How are they measured? What percentage they cover on the assessment framework? You need to consider all of that in assessment of learning, because at the end of the day, it should be on total score and reported to the stakeholders to describe the student's performance. Okay, now in the second point of the assessment framework is assessment for learning, or formative assessment. So in contrast to assessment of learning, assessment for learning are not used as a final evaluation, but it is a part of ongoing process of teaching and learning to monitor the students' progress during the program and providing with the feedback. There are a lot of forms of formative assessment to support students' learning in classroom, as described by University of Huddersfield. It may involve in-class question and answer, peer assessment, self-assessment, quizzes, detailed comment on a piece of homework. It's also a form of formative assessment. There are a lot of definition, but most of them points out on the way it helps the student process in learning. Formative, clarify students' learning and understanding. And at the end of the day, it's different from assessment of learning because it doesn't involve decision-making of final scoring and grading, because it is still considered on ongoing process. So, for example, here, New South Wales Educational Standard describe that assessment for learning reflect a view learning in which assessment helps students learn better. It involves formal and informal assessment, clear goals in each activity, reflects belief, encourage self-assessment, involve teachers, student, parents to reflect the evidence, and inclusive to all learners. The point out here is that the teacher may play the central role to describe the progress of the students. In contrast to assessment for learning is assessment as learning. Assessment as learning occurs when students act as their own assessor. They have this metacognition, self-regulation in understanding the process of their learning, so that they might use strategies. In assessment as learning, New South Wales educational standard, for example, describe that it encourage students to take responsibility for their own learning, involve teachers and students. It can be in the formal or informal feedback, self-assessment, peer assessment, and also reflection. In assessment as learning, there is an important point here, as argued by Dan to 2014 in his article, Assessment as Learning During the Boundaries of Assessment and Learning for Theory, Policy, and Practice. The point in assessment as learning that the learner understand his or her central role as learner who should be actively engaged and creates meaning in classroom interaction. So it might involve learning skills and understanding of regulatory process in learning and also mediating process. They are aware of the use of self-assessment, peer assessment, and discursive feedback during the learning practice to regulate their own learning. Now, as we already refreshed the concept of assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment of learning, let's take a look on Indonesia's secondary context. Indonesia school context, yeah. The level of education is secondary, so it may involve senior high schools and junior high school who provide English subject, and we should remind that in Indonesia, English is a foreign language. And in this case, we will talk about the way curriculum 2013 frames the lesson planning, define the basic competence learning, objective, and assessment framework. So on the next session, we are going to learn from Salva's stories and Evan's story for their teaching internship in one senior high school and one junior high school in Yogyakarta. So let's learn from them.